नमस्कार, हम हैं आदित्य और सौम्या।
और आपका स्वागत है घटना चक्र के इस नए और ज्ञानवर्धक सफर में।
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging into, well, one of the biggest questions there is, really. What are the absolute fundamental building blocks that actually gave rise to all life here on Earth?
It's a huge question.
Exactly. And our source material for today's deep dive tackles this very mystery head on, trying to get right to the elemental origins of, well, everything alive.
That's right. And our mission here for this deep dive is to really unpack which elements truly hold the key. We want to move beyond just, listing them off.
Right.
We need to understand why certain ones are so incredibly crucial. It's about figuring out what's genuinely foundational versus what's just there.
Yeah. And what's really interesting is that this isn't just looking back into ancient history. I mean, it is, but it's still a live question. There's a scientific event coming up that highlights just how relevant this still is.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, there's some fascinating recent research that seems to double down on how vital these specific core elements are. So our source material kind of jumps right in, focusing on this maybe surprising idea that while life is incredibly complex, its absolute very first foundational building blocks might boil down to just 3 elements.
Yeah, just 3.
We're talking carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen. The sources point to this group as being fundamentally responsible for the origin of life on Earth. But, okay, why those 3? That's what we need to get into.
It is fascinating, isn't it? Because you look around, life uses lots of elements.
Yeah.
But when you break down the most essential biological molecules, your proteins, nucleic acids like DNA, sugars, fats, they are primarily built from a really small core group.
Okay, so this small group. Scientists have a handy way to remember them, right? This acronym, CHNOPS. Is that just a memory aid, or is there more significance to grouping them like that?
Yeah, CHNOPS is the classic mnemonic. It stands for carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, and sulfur. And it's more than just handy. These really are the 6 elements that make up the vast, vast majority of all living matter.
Gotcha. So CHNOPS covers the main players. But if our source material singles out carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen from that group as the answer to the origin question, let's really drill down why those specific 3. What makes carbon, say, so indispensable?
Carbon. Well, carbon is, it's truly the backbone, the basis of all organic molecules. And it's this pretty amazing ability to form complex structures because it can make 4 strong covalent bonds with other atoms, including other carbon atoms.
To 4 bonds, right? That allows for chains and rings.
Exactly. Long chains, complex rings, branching structures. That's what we talk about the carbon backbone. It's the fundamental scaffold for practically all the important stuff. Proteins, sugars, fats. Life as we know it is quite literally built on carbon.
Okay, scaffold covered. What about hydrogen then?
Hydrogen, well, it's everywhere. It's a vital component of water, obviously, which is essential for life.
The universal solvent.
Right. And it's in nearly all biomolecules, too. Plus, it's absolutely crucial for energy. Think about energy storage, energy transfer.
Mm-hmm.
Things like proton gradients across membranes as hydrogen ions powering cellular machines. It's small, but mighty.
Okay, carbon for structure, hydrogen for water and energy. That leaves nitrogen. Why is it in that top 3?
Nitrogen is non-negotiable for genetics and proteins. It's absolutely essential for building amino acids, which are the monomers that make up protein.
Right, the building blocks of proteins.
And it's also a key component of the nucleic acids, DNA, and RNA, the molecules that carry genetic information. You can't have genes or enzymes without nitrogen. And if you think bigger picture, the whole nitrogen cycle in nature is about converting atmospheric nitrogen into forms that plants can actually use to make those amino acids. It's fundamental.
So carbon's bonding ability, hydrogen's role in water and energy, nitrogen's necessity for proteins and genes, that really does sound like a foundational chemical toolkit. Is there anything else that even comes close to those 3 in terms of just getting life started?
For the origin, it seems those 3 are really the primary suspects for forming the initial complex organic molecules needed.
Okay. And just to round out that CHNOPS idea, we focused on C, H, and N. But oxygen, phosphorus, and sulfur are obviously important too, right? Our sources mention them being major auxiliary elements.
Absolutely critical. Oxygen is huge for respiration, and it's part of water and many organic molecules. Phosphorus is key for ATP, the cell's energy currency, and for the structure of DNA and cell membranes.
Right, phospholipids.
Exactly. And sulfur is important for the structure of some amino acids and proteins and certain vitamins. They are definitely essential for life as we know it.
So CHNOPS is the full set for complex life, but maybe CH and N were the pioneers, the absolute first requirement to get organic complexity going. It's kind of like nature's universal Lego set, but maybe you only needed those 3 specific block types to build the very first interesting structure.
That's a decent analogy, yeah. You need those 3 to even start building something that looks like a precursor to life.
Okay, so we have this idea about CHN being fundamental, but how do we know this isn't just, a theory? What's the evidence that these elements were playing these roles right from the very beginning? The Stanley Miller experiment often comes up here. What was so important about that?
The Miller-Urey experiment, yeah. It was groundbreaking. Back in the 50s, they tried to simulate the conditions of early Earth, a primitive atmosphere with water, methane, ammonia, hydrogen, and energy like lightning.
Okay.
And what they found was remarkable. They managed to create amino acids. And crucially, amino acids are compounds containing carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen, along with oxygen.
Wow. So they showed these simple inorganic molecules could spontaneously form life's building blocks.
Exactly. It provided really compelling early evidence that the fundamental components of proteins could arise naturally from simple precursors, just using the elements thought to be available on the early Earth. It showed a plausible pathway.
And that basic finding still holds up.
It does, broadly speaking. And it's not just history. You mentioned recent research. A study in Nature Ecology reinforces this. It looked at the likely composition of ancient proteins and found strong evidence that, yes, carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen played a major role right back then.
So the experiment showed it could happen, and now we're seeing evidence in ancient molecules that it likely did happen that way.
Precisely. It connects that classic experimental work to what we infer about actual biological history.
Yeah.
The consistency is pretty strong.
That really underscores the fundamental nature of these elements, doesn't it? And it's amazing to see this field is still so active. Our source material points out this upcoming Origin of Life Symposium. It's happening in August 2025 in Copenhagen.
Oh, right. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, and they'll be discussing everything from planet formation to prebiotic chemistry, how non-living molecules first formed, then self-assembly, autocatalysis, basically all the steps leading up to the very first hints of evolution. It shows these questions are far from settled, people are actively working on them.
Absolutely. It's one of the most fundamental scientific frontiers. And speaking of evolution and those building blocks, if we think about the key molecules of life, like DNA, it's worth just reiterating its components.
Okay.
DNA's structure specifically includes carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, and phosphorus, all part of our CHNOPS group, again, CHNOP.
Right, which leads to a bit of a chicken and egg problem sometimes, doesn't it? DNA is so complex. How did that get started? This brings up another idea the sources touch on, the RNA world hypothesis. What's that about?
The RNA world. It's a really influential hypothesis. The basic idea is that RNA, not DNA, might have been the primary biomolecule in the very early stages of life.
RNA came first.
Potentially, yes. The hypothesis suggests that RNA could have acted as both the carrier of genetic information, like DNA does now, and as a catalyst for chemical reactions, like proteins or enzymes do now.
So it did both jobs, the blueprint and the builder.
Kind of, yeah. RNA can store information, and certain types of RNA, called ribozymes, can catalyze reactions. So the idea is that early life might have been based heavily on RNA before the more specialized roles of DNA as the stable genetic store, and proteins as the main catalysts evolved later.
Huh. That's a fascinating way to bridge the gap towards complexity.
It is. It's a key concept when thinking about how life might have transitioned from simple chemistry to complex biology.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. Our deep dive today suggests that while life uses a fair few elements from the periodic table, when you boil it down to the absolute essentials for getting started, it really seems to be carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen forming that foundational trio.
That seems to be the core message from the origin perspective, yes. They provide the essential structure, the fuel, the components for the first critical organic molecules.
It's pretty remarkable, isn't it, how these relatively simple, abundant elements, just through their basic chemical properties, could combine to kickstart something as complex and varied as life.
It really is. It underscores the elegance, you could say, of the underlying chemistry. These elements didn't just start life. Their properties continue to dictate its structure and function, from microbes right up to us. It shows how powerful basic chemical rules can be.
So here's something to think about. Knowing that life's fundamental toolkit boils down to elements like carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen elements that are actually pretty common throughout the universe. How does that change the way you think about, say, the possibility of life elsewhere? or even just appreciating the incredible constant biochemical orchestra happening inside your own body right now, all based on these core building blocks.